First, they lost their sons. Now, they might lose her too. Diogo Jota and André Silva were more than just football stars. They were brothers in spirit, warriors for Portugal, and the pride of their families. But ever since that devastating car crash stole both their lives, something inside their parents seemed to wither, especially Diogo's mother. She had been quiet through the funerals, silent through the tributes, and invisible through the nationwide grief. While fans lit candles and held up jerseys, she simply stared ahead, as if already halfway to somewhere else. And then, just moments ago, a heartbreaking update shattered what was left of our peace. Sources close to the family now confirm Diogo Jota's mother has suffered a serious health collapse. She was rushed to the hospital. Doctors have confirmed she is in critical condition. And one hospital worker who heard her speak says she only managed to say one thing, one sentence that sent chills through everyone. "I'm ready to meet our sons." What happened to her? What does this mean for the Jota family? And how did fans across the world respond to this devastating turn? It started as a normal day. No one could have predicted that within hours, two of Portugal's brightest stars would be gone forever. The crash that killed Diogo Jota and André Silva didn't just claim two lives, it tore a hole in the heart of a nation. News broke late at night. A violent collision on a rural road outside Lisbon. The wreckage was unrecognizable. By the time emergency crews arrived, there was nothing they could do. Both men were pronounced dead at the scene. Fans didn't believe it at first. Social media flooded with denial. Fake news. This can't be real. Check your sources. But as the official confirmation came from both the national team and their clubs, disbelief turned into devastation. These weren't just footballers. They were symbols. Diogo Jota, the relentless striker with the heart of a lion. André Silva, the elegant finisher who turned pressure into poetry. Together, they were a generation's hope, a duo that could have taken Portugal to even greater heights. In stadiums across Europe, tributes poured in, silence before kickoffs, armbands worn, flares lit in their honor. But far away from the public mourning, inside a quiet family home, a different kind of silence settled, the kind that doesn't end with applause. Because behind the headlines were two sets of parents, two mothers who had once cradled their sons in their arms, and now they had to bury them. But this was only the beginning of the pain, because for Diogo Jota's mother, the loss would go even deeper. In the days that followed the crash, the world watched Portugal come together in grief. Candlelight vigils, murals painted overnight, thousands chanting their names in city squares. But one thing stood out, something eerie. Neither Diogo Jota's nor André Silva's parents made any public statements. No interviews, no messages, not even a photograph of them at the funerals. And those who knew them personally started to worry. A neighbor of the Jota family quietly told reporters, "She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just stared at the wall for hours, like she wasn't even here." André Silva's father was seen once, standing in the corner of the cemetery, sunglasses on, head down, unmoving even as the casket lowered. Friends of the family said both sets of parents were emotionally paralyzed. Some whispered they hadn't spoken a full sentence since the tragedy. Food remained untouched on tables. Phones went unanswered. Curtains stayed closed for days. It wasn't grief in the way most people know it. It was something heavier, something darker. Rumors began to spread that Diogo Jota's mother had fallen into a deep emotional shutdown. A few family members suggested she was mentally somewhere else. Some feared she might never come back. Because how do you survive something like this? How do you watch your son become a global hero, only to watch him vanish overnight? And behind closed doors, something even more terrifying was brewing. Something no one outside the family was prepared to face, because her silence was about to become something much worse. Just hours ago, the silence broke. Sources close to the family confirmed what many feared. Diogo Jota's mother has suffered a complete physical and emotional collapse. It happened late at night. According to one family member, she had been sitting alone in Diogo's childhood room, surrounded by old jerseys, medals, and photographs. She hadn't spoken to anyone all day. Then suddenly, a loud crash. She had fallen, hard. Her husband found her unconscious on the floor, barely breathing, her pulse faint. He called emergency services in a panic. By the time paramedics arrived, her body was limp and cold to the touch. She was rushed to the hospital under emergency code. What doctors found next sent shockwaves through the hospital staff. Her body hadn't given out because of illness or age. It was heartbreak, a form of stress-induced cardiomyopathy, often called broken heart syndrome, triggered by overwhelming emotional trauma. Her heart wasn't functioning properly. She had suffered what doctors described as a massive internal shutdown, and even more chilling, a nurse working in the ICU later revealed that, just before losing consciousness again, Jota's mother whispered a single haunting sentence: "I'm ready to meet our sons." That's all she said. She hasn't spoken since. Now she lies in a darkened room, surrounded by machines, breathing tubes, and the unbearable weight of grief. Her husband hasn't left her side, but witnesses say he hasn't said a word either. One hospital staff member told reporters, "It doesn't feel like a medical emergency. It feels like watching someone give up." And the doctors? They say she's not stable, not even close. But the most heartbreaking part? This wasn't the end of the nightmare, because her collapse would send her husband and the entire nation spiraling into even deeper despair. The intensive care unit was quiet that night until she was wheeled in. Doctors moved quickly. Monitors beeped in frantic rhythms. Nurses whispered updates. But nothing they did could change the core diagnosis. Her body was still alive, but her spirit seemed to have already left. Diogo Jota's mother remained unresponsive for hours. A team of specialists confirmed she was experiencing severe cardiac dysfunction, triggered by extreme emotional trauma. Her blood pressure had crashed. Her oxygen levels dipped dangerously low. One doctor described it as a case he'd only seen once or twice in his entire career, and never this severe. But what haunted the hospital staff most wasn't the medical data, it was her words. A nurse who had been adjusting her IV said she leaned in to speak softly, just in case Jota's mother could hear. And that's when it happened. Barely audible, through cracked lips and a trembling breath, she whispered, "I'm tired. I just want to go where they are." The nurse froze. No one knew what to say. No one dared respond. According to one staff member, her husband, Diogo's father, broke down right there in the ICU hallway. He sank to the floor, head in his hands, and sobbed like a child. A man who hadn't cried at the funeral was now shattered in front of strangers. Doctors did everything they could: sedatives, fluids, oxygen support. But even as her vitals improved slightly, something deeper remained broken. She wasn't fighting. One physician reportedly told a close family member, "We can stabilize her body, but I don't think she wants to stay." And while the hospital continued its efforts, the outside world began to catch on. Rumors leaked. Journalists showed up. Fans started praying. But inside that cold, sterile ICU room, none of it mattered. Because for a grieving mother who lost her only child, the crowd outside couldn't reach her anymore. And as the night stretched into morning, her husband made a quiet call. To family, to friends, to prepare for the worst. But the story didn't stop there. because the man who once stood tall beside his sons was now facing heartbreak beyond words. He had already lost 2 sons. Now he was watching his wife slip away too. Diogo Jota's father, once seen as the quiet backbone of the family, is now barely holding on. Those who know him say he's not the same man anymore. Neighbors recall seeing him walking alone in the garden, staring at the sky, whispering to himself. One even described him as walking without a soul. Since his wife was rushed to the ICU, he hasn't left the hospital. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. Staff offered him water. He refused. A nurse reportedly found him in the hallway one night, slumped against the wall, murmuring, "How do I bury 2 sons and then lose her too?" At the funeral, he stood like stone. No tears, no speech, no movement. But now, the weight has finally crushed him. A family friend revealed that he recently told someone close to him, "I was supposed to go first. I'm the father. They were my future, my reason. Now, what am I supposed to do?" André Silva's father, also reeling from the tragedy, reached out privately to offer support. The 2 men, once strangers bonded only through their son's friendship, are now tied by something deeper, the unbearable burden of survival.